I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
The meeting had not even begun when Princess Anne placed a single-page order beside the empty chairman's seat. One name had been crossed from the attendance register. One palace invitation had been withdrawn. And before Tom Parker Bowles could enter the room for his first official meeting, the Princess Royal had ordered Camilla's son removed from the palace charity board entirely. It was swift, humiliating, and impossible to reverse without challenging Anne directly. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne entered before the trustees and opened Tom's appointment file without speaking. The Palace Charity Board was the royal body overseeing palace-linked funds, public grants, and partnerships carrying the crown's reputation, so a seat offered more than ceremony. It gave influence and legitimacy. She closed the folder, set down her pen, and said, "He will not take that seat." The order was precise. Princess Anne canceled Tom Parker Bowles' appointment hours before his first scheduled meeting, removed his name from the attendance register, and withdrew his boardroom access. No delay, no probation, no compromise. The decision landed like a judgment prepared for resistance. Camilla was dressing for the meeting when an aide entered with the news. The queen consort stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "Say that again," she demanded. He repeated that Tom's palace pass had been canceled, and security had been instructed not to admit him. She gripped the table as shock hardened into fury. Her son had not merely lost a role. He had been stopped before he could defend himself. A palace secretary lifted Tom's name card from the polished table and hesitated. Everyone would notice the empty chair. Everyone would understand that someone expected there had been erased before the doors opened. Anne watched the card disappear, but she did not soften. Her silence made the removal feel absolutely final. Yet the decision had not been born that morning. Anne had arrived with a sealed file containing correspondence, governance concerns, and a handwritten instruction authorizing immediate removal. The document showed that she expected Camilla to object and had prepared for that confrontation. This was not anger, it was strategy. Charles learned of the order after it had been carried out. The king's first reaction was disbelief, followed by a colder realization. His sister had acted without consulting him. At the same moment, Camilla made her own decision. Tom would not be publicly humiliated without an answer. Before the first trustee could open a folder, the dispute had already moved beyond one canceled appointment and directly into the private loyalties of the royal family. For Camilla, the order was not merely a boardroom decision. It was a rejection of her son at the gates of the institution she had spent years trying to navigate. For Anne, however, the issue was not Tom's family name, but the boundary between royal service and personal advancement. Between those two women stood Charles, caught between his sister's uncompromising principles and his wife's wounded demand that her child be treated with dignity. Tom Parker Bowles had prepared for that morning under intense scrutiny. He had rehearsed his opening remarks until every sentence sounded calm, measured, and useful. Inside the folder against his chest were charity proposals he believed could prove he deserved the appointment. The board was not simply a meeting group, it supervised palace-linked charitable funds and partnerships carrying the crown's public trust. To him, the seat meant acceptance. To others, it risked looking like privilege. Anne saw the matter differently. Princess Anne had built her reputation around duty, discipline, and service earned over decades, not granted through family connection. She believed palace charity roles had to survive public examination, because one appearance of favoritism could damage every cause attached to the monarchy. Her concern was not only Tom, it was the credibility of everyone already serving beside him. Tom reached the palace entrance expecting nerves, not rejection. A senior security officer stepped forward, checked the revised access list, and quietly informed him that his pass was no longer valid. He stared at the closed doors, then lowered the folder he had held so tightly. "Does my mother know?" he asked. The officer did not answer immediately, and that hesitation told him enough. Camilla knew moments later. The queen consort entered Charles's private sitting room with the canceled invitation in her hand and placed it before him. She demanded to know whether he had approved Anne's order. The king looked at the paper, then at his wife, but said nothing. His silence cut deeper than denial. She understood that he had not stopped it. Charles carried a secret of his own. He had never personally signed Tom's final appointment letter. His office had allowed the process to move forward. Yet the monarch had delayed adding his name. He had sensed the danger, but he had hoped time would remove the need for a painful choice. Camilla then noticed another document inside his open folder. William had written a private memorandum asking whether placing her son on a palace-controlled board could make royal access appear inherited through marriage rather than earned through service. The prince had not accused Tom of wrongdoing. He had questioned the damage of perception. The cancelled seat was painful enough, but the discovery of William's warning transformed Camilla's humiliation into suspicion, and suspicion demanded a history. The removal did not begin with Anne's signature. It began 3 weeks earlier at a private fundraising dinner inside St. James's Palace, when one careless conversation changed the meaning of Tom's appointment. Guests had come expecting speeches about service. Instead, Anne heard Camilla's son discuss board access as though his seat were already guaranteed, and then watched a potential donor imply that Tom's family connection could open doors ordinary trustees could never reach. Tom Parker Bowles had been speaking with Sir Malcolm Vane during the St. James's Palace Charity Patrons Dinner, a formal gathering where wealthy supporters met representatives of royal-backed causes. Their conversation appeared harmless, until Tom lowered his voice and said his expected board position would allow him to move proposals through the palace more quickly. The words were brief. The damage was not. Anne stood several feet away, speaking with a hospital patron, when the sentence reached her. Princess Anne stopped in the middle of her reply and turned toward the two men. Sir Malcolm then handed Tom a private funding proposal intended for board review, treating him not as a future volunteer, but as a direct route into royal decision-making. She watched every movement. She forgot nothing. Tom felt the change before anyone spoke. His eyes met Anne's across the room, and the confidence left his face. He crossed toward her and explained that he had meant faster communication, not special influence. He insisted the proposal would still face proper review. She listened without interrupting, but her expression told him that the explanation had come too late. Camilla defended him before the dinner had even ended. The Queen Consort followed Anne into a private corridor and demanded to know why one careless phrase had become a crisis. Her sister-in-law answered that palace charity work depended on public trust, because donors and families had to believe money and access were handled fairly. Camilla replied that Tom was being judged more harshly because he was her son, not because he had acted corruptly. Anne discovered something worse the next morning. Sir Malcolm's foundation had previously sponsored one of Tom's commercial food events, creating a personal connection that made the proposal appear far less innocent. The Princess Royal then sent Camilla a handwritten warning through a palace courier. Tom must withdraw voluntarily, or she would raise the matter before the board herself. Camilla read the note twice, folded it, and locked it inside her desk. She believed Charles would protect the appointment before Anne could act. Preparations continued. Tom rehearsed his remarks. The meeting remained on the calendar. Camilla believed royal authority would settle the matter quietly, but Anne had already decided that silence would make the palace complicit. Anne did not raise her voice when Camilla entered the boardroom. She did not need to. The removed name card sat inside a wastepaper basket. Tom's unopened briefing folder had been returned to the secretary, and every chair except one was occupied. Camilla walked directly toward her sister-in-law and demanded that the order be withdrawn. Anne remained standing, met her stare, and delivered 6 words that froze the room. "He will not sit on that board." Camilla ordered the trustees to leave before formal business began. The Queen Consort wanted the confrontation contained, but Anne refused to hide a decision affecting the Palace Charity Board, the body responsible for royal-backed funds and partnerships. She said those charged with protecting public trust had a right to hear why a proposed member had been removed. Camilla argued that Tom had been recommended through proper channels and had years of fundraising experience. She insisted her son had not stolen influence or accepted money. Anne answered that experience could not erase what happened at the St. James's dinner. The problem was not only conduct. It was the appearance that family access could move private proposals toward royal approval. Camilla's anger broke through. She accused Anne of never accepting her children as part of the extended royal family. Tom had prepared for weeks, she said, only to be stopped by guards as though he were a threat. Her voice cracked on the final words, exposing the wound beneath the fury. This was no longer about procedure. It was about belonging. Anne stepped closer, but her tone remained cold and controlled. Princess Anne said she would have issued the same order against her own child under the same circumstances. Family loyalty could not become a shield against scrutiny. Service, she insisted, had to survive embarrassment, resentment, and even private pain. Charles entered before Camilla could answer. The king had been told only that the two women were confronting each other, but the discarded name card revealed the seriousness before anyone spoke. He looked from his wife to his sister, then down at the empty chair waiting between them. Anne moved first. She placed Sir Malcolm's proposal on the table beside a written transcript of the dinner conversation, a formal record of the words that triggered the removal. Charles read the highlighted sentence slowly. Then he removed his glasses and said nothing. His silence was not agreement, but it was no defense. Camilla turned toward him. She asked whether he would restore Tom's seat or allow Anne to disgrace their family before the entire palace. Charles had entered hoping to calm two furious women. Instead, he found himself holding the one document that made neutrality impossible. A king may command rooms, ceremonies, and institutions, but Charles discovered that he could not make this decision without losing something personal. Restoring Tom would weaken Anne and expose the charity board to accusations of favoritism. Supporting the removal would leave Camilla believing that her son had been sacrificed to preserve the crown's image. Alone with the unsigned appointment letter, Charles lifted his pen twice. Both times, he lowered it without touching the page. Charles still possessed the authority of the sovereign, but the board's governance charter, the written rules controlling how members could be appointed, suspended, or removed, gave Anne power as senior royal overseer. If confidence had been damaged, she could act. The king could challenge her, but doing so would make the crown appear to rewrite its own rules for family. William entered the study after being summoned privately. The prince had already read the dinner transcript and knew how dangerous reversal would look. He told his father that restoring Tom after the evidence emerged would suggest charitable standards could bend whenever royal relationships became uncomfortable. That impression, he warned, could wound every cause connected to the palace. Charles reread the appointment letter and whispered that Tom may have spoken foolishly rather than dishonestly. The king wanted room for human error. He wanted to believe one careless sentence should not erase a man's good intentions. Yet he also knew that public trust did not measure intention alone. It measured what power appeared to permit. William chose his words carefully. He told Charles that kindness could not require the monarchy to ignore the appearance of privileged access. The future king understood that every sentence risked deepening Camilla's resentment, but silence would place the burden on Anne alone. He would not allow that. Charles then opened a second envelope. Anne had drafted a resignation from her charity oversight role, meaning she was prepared to surrender her authority rather than defend a board she no longer trusted. The letter was calm, direct, and devastating. She had given her brother a choice without threatening him aloud. William noticed that Tom's appointment document remained unsigned. The prince asked why, and Charles finally admitted the truth. He had delayed approval after hearing about the dinner. He had sensed the danger from the beginning, but hoped it would disappear before he had to confront his wife. Charles folded Anne's resignation, returned Tom's appointment letter to its envelope, and rang for an aide. His voice remained steady when he asked for Camilla to be brought to him alone. The question was no longer whether Tom would attend the meeting, it was whether Camilla could accept that Charles had chosen not to save him. Tom remained in his car outside the palace longer than anyone expected. His briefing folder rested unopened beside him, his temporary access badge lay face down on the seat, and messages from journalists had already begun appearing on his phone. Inside, Charles informed Camilla that Anne's removal order would stand. The decision lasted less than a minute. Its emotional consequences spread through the family before the first charity meeting had even reached its opening agenda. Tom's palace credentials were formally withdrawn before noon. His biography disappeared from the charity's internal papers, and every trustee received a revised agenda confirming that the seat was vacant. The change mattered because the board controlled royal-backed funding and public partnerships. Leaving his name in place, even briefly, would suggest the palace had not accepted the removal. Anne opened the meeting at the scheduled time. Princess Anne acknowledged the disruption in a single sentence, then turned the page and moved directly to the first grant application. She refused to let family anger consume work meant to support hospitals, youth projects, and vulnerable communities. Her control impressed some trustees. It unsettled others. Camilla reacted very differently. The queen consort listened as Charles confirmed that he would not reverse his sister's order. then removed the brooch she had chosen for the meeting and placed it sharply on the table. She told the king he had protected the institution but abandoned her son. He tried to explain that the evidence left him no safe alternative, but she turned away before he finished. Tom called his mother from the car. He asked her not to fight further on his behalf, and insisted that a forced restoration would only deepen the humiliation. His voice remained steady until he admitted what truly hurt. Being stopped at the palace door, he said, had made him feel like an intruder in her world. Camilla closed her eyes, and for the first time, her anger gave way to grief. A palace courier arrived minutes later with a sealed letter from Anne. The message stated that Tom's removal was permanent, but it was not a verdict on his entire character. He placed the envelope beside his badge and refused to open it. Then another message arrived. Sir Malcolm had abruptly withdrawn his funding proposal from consideration. The donor offered no full explanation, but his retreat suggested the dinner exchange could not survive formal scrutiny. Tom finally opened Anne's letter and read only the first line. Then he asked for a private meeting with the Princess Royal, without Camilla, Charles, lawyers, or aides. The public appointment was over, but the private reckoning between the man who lost the seat and the woman who removed him had yet to begin. There were no secretaries in the room when Tom faced Anne. No board papers, no royal advisors, and no mother prepared to defend him. He placed the rejected briefing folder between them and asked one direct question. Had she removed him because she believed he was dishonest, or because his presence had become inconvenient? Anne studied him for several seconds before answering. What followed was not an apology, but it changed the meaning of the entire confrontation. Tom Parker Bowles remained standing until Princess Anne asked him to sit. The small palace library offered none of the protection of a formal hearing, which is an official meeting where evidence is examined and a decision may be challenged. This conversation was personal. He had not come to win back the board seat. He had come to understand why she had taken it away. Tom admitted that his words at the dinner had been careless. He also accepted that taking Sir Malcolm's proposal directly created the impression that access to him meant access to the crown. That appearance mattered, because palace-linked charities depended on donors believing every proposal would receive equal treatment. Once trust weakened, even honest decisions could look purchased. Anne listened without interrupting. She told him that she had never accused him of taking money or arranging a secret favor. Her concern was simpler and more dangerous. People had begun to believe his family connection could move private interests closer to royal approval. She could not allow that belief to settle around the board. Tom's restraint finally cracked. He said he had wanted the role because it might prove Camilla's children could contribute without being treated as permanent outsiders. He was tired of entering every royal space under suspicion. Losing the appointment hurt, but being stopped at the door had made him feel that he would never truly belong. Anne's expression softened. She told him that belonging to a royal family did not mean receiving every royal position. Sometimes loyalty required accepting the one door that had to remain closed. She understood the cruelty of that lesson, but she would not pretend public service existed to heal private wounds. Anne then offered another path. She would support Tom's independent charity work away from palace governance, provided no royal title, board authority, or privileged access was attached. His work could still matter. It simply had to stand without the crown protecting it. Tom revealed through their private conversation that Camilla wanted him to appeal through Charles. He had decided against it. A forced restoration, he said, would destroy whatever credibility remained. Tom left with Anne's letter in his pocket, ready to face his mother. She had given him a way to leave with dignity, but dignity would mean little unless Camilla could release the battle she had made her own. By sunrise, one image had overtaken every explanation. An empty chair at the palace charity board table, its place card removed while Anne sat upright at the head of the meeting. The photograph transformed a private governance dispute into a national symbol. Some saw ruthless discipline, others saw a mother's son publicly rejected. But outside Buckingham Palace, where a small crowd gathered beneath the gates, one handwritten sign captured the public argument in 4 words: "Charity is not inheritance." The London Chronicle carried the crisis across its front page. Princess Anne appeared beneath the headline, "No Family Favors," while a smaller image showed Tom being stopped at the palace entrance. The Palace Charity Board, the royal body overseeing crown-linked donations and public grants, had suddenly become the center of a national argument about whether family connection could ever be separated from public power. A national evening presenter sharpened that argument further. Opening the broadcast, she called the dispute the first major test of where the modern monarchy draws the line between blended family and public office. The words spread quickly because they reached beyond Tom's canceled seat. They questioned what belonging to the royal family should actually provide. Camilla watched the coverage in silence. The queen consort endured the headlines, the commentators, and the repeated discussion of Anne's authority. But when the footage showed her son lowering his eyes outside the palace, she reached for the remote and switched off the television before the report ended. Public debate had turned his private humiliation into entertainment. Tom answered the pressure himself. Standing outside his home, Tom Parker Bowles delivered a brief recorded statement accepting responsibility for creating an impression that compromised the board. He said careless words had made proper charity work look like privileged access. Then he asked the public not to attack either his mother or Anne. The request surprised those expecting anger and weakened every attempt to turn him into a victim seeking revenge. Charles ended any hope of reversal that afternoon. A formal palace statement, a written declaration expressing the monarch's official position, confirmed that the king respected the board's independent governance and considered the matter closed. Tom would not be reinstated. The empty chair was now permanent. Anne refused to celebrate. Princess Anne declined invitations to praise her decision and instructed palace staff to redirect attention toward medical grants awaiting approval. Her response made one truth harder to dismiss. She had acted to defend standards, not to enjoy Camilla's pain. Camilla returned to the locked drawer after hearing Tom's statement. She removed Anne's original warning note and read it again, this time without fury controlling every sentence. The nation had already delivered its judgment, but the final verdict would come inside the family, where Camilla had to choose between protecting her pride and respecting her son's decision. The crisis ended not with another royal order, but with Camilla walking into her son's home without aides, documents, or arguments prepared. Tom had lost the board seat, Anne had preserved the institution, and Charles had survived a choice that wounded his wife. Yet none of them could leave the moment unchanged. Around a quiet table, Camilla finally admitted that defending her son had become more important to her than asking whether the appointment itself could still command public trust. Tom Parker Bowles did not ask his mother to apologize. He simply told her that Anne's decision had been painful, humiliating, and ultimately correct. Restoring him through royal pressure would make every future achievement look borrowed from the crown. The Palace Charity Board, the body responsible for royal-backed funds and public grants, required confidence that no family connection could outweigh its rules. Tom confirmed that the matter was finished. He would not join the board, attend another meeting, or pursue an appeal through Charles. The vacant seat would be filled through an independent selection process, meaning candidates would be judged without direct family intervention. For the first time, Camilla understood that reopening the dispute would not restore her son's dignity. It would destroy it. Camilla finally admitted what she had been fighting. The queen consort said, watching Tom stopped at the palace entrance, had awakened years of fear that her children would always remain outsiders. He took her hand and answered that acceptance could not be measured by palace passes, royal titles, or seats at important tables. Her family did not need institutional privilege to prove its worth. Camilla later met Anne alone. She told Princess Anne that the removal had been unnecessarily brutal, and that Tom deserved a private warning before public exclusion. Her sister-in-law accepted the criticism, but refused regret. Silence stretched between them, before Camilla said she would no longer challenge the order. It was not forgiveness, it was surrender to the truth. Charles preserved the cost of that truth. The king placed Anne's unused resignation beside Tom's unsigned appointment document inside a private archive file, a confidential record kept for future royal reference. Together, the papers showed the decision he had delayed until delay became impossible. Tom began supporting community food charities without a palace title or board authority. Camilla attended his first event quietly, while Anne sent a private donation without announcement. The conflict was not erased. It was transformed. The empty chair remained empty, and that was the point. Anne's order wounded a mother, humbled a son, and forced a king to choose. But by accepting the consequence without revenge, the family transformed public humiliation into private dignity and proved that the crown could protect its standards without permanently destroying the people caught beneath them. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.